All right, everyone. Welcome to the Rental Roundtable. We've got head of marketing at Quipli, Evan Reed, on today. Welcome, Evan. We talk to you every single day of the week, but good to see you here on the Rental Roundtable.
Kyle, thanks for having me. It's good to be on camera for once. Usually I'm in the background, so it's nice to see everyone.
Well, I'm happy. This is 26th episode. We do these every 2 weeks, and finally have someone with less equipment rental experience than me on here. I've been doing this. Next week is 4 years working on Quipli, but I'm sort of joking. We've never had anyone with as much marketing experience on as you, so I think it's gonna be a good episode here.
I'm excited to dive in, get a lot of questions every day from our customers on marketing. So this should be a fun session.
Yeah, we see a lot of names already joining. Jeff, Jeanette, Greg, Dino, Derek, Buck, Ahmed, Kayla, Steven, Steve, Rita, Rebecca, Zach, a bunch of other people. Welcome. Feel free to chat in questions as we kind of get in here. And just a reminder, there's different ways to engage on this. Obviously, this is the live webinar. We post these on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Music also a week or two after the episodes too. So if you're listening on Spotify, YouTube, or watching live, there's other ways to engage here. So with that being said, let's jump in here. So Evan, for the audience, give a little bit background of how long you've been in marketing, some of the things you've worked on, in particular, some of the things you've worked on in the equipment rental space.
Yeah, happy to. I've spent my entire career pretty much in marketing on the tech side. I joined Quipli about 2 years ago to help drive up revenue growth here, but also taking over our client marketing. So I don't know if any of our marketing clients are on, but the guy behind most of what we're doing there. I have grown a couple of tech companies, taking them from 0 to 50 mil in ARR, and hope to do that with our clients here as well. On the equipment rental side, we basically built a marketing agency from the ground up within Quipli in the last year, focused on high performance strategies for all of our customers to drive more leads and traffic, both from organic and paid and all kinds of sources. And it's been a lot of fun working on that. So looking forward to getting into that.
Yeah, just for everyone, Evan's team's really focused on two things. One is obviously growing the Quipli.com brand, but the part that's interesting today is all the marketing services we run for dozens of rental companies today, and that continues to grow. That's what we're going to talk about today is not how to grow a rental software business, but how to grow an equipment rental business using digital ads. And we've been doing that for a few years now. And just a plug here, we've also put together a 4-hour course for the American Rental Association. It's on the ARA website. It's also in the Rental Roundtable Facebook group. So at the end of this, if you want to go even deeper than this hour session, there is a 4-hour course we put together as well with the American Rental Association. So just plug in that. So I guess, Evan, just jumping in here, let's start with the basics. What are you seeing right now in the equipment rental space relative to digital marketing? What's working, what's not working? Let's talk about some of the basics here.
Yeah, and just to sort of narrow the aperture here, I'm going to talk mostly about digital channels. I mean, there's a lot of other guerrilla marketing, sort of grassroots things that work really well. Like we had Rodney Coker on talking about his hat strategy, right? Which is awesome. I'm going to narrow this. Yeah, it's awesome. I'm going to narrow this down to digital marketing. I think it comes down to a couple of things. And I look at, architecting these strategies as almost like building a house, right? Having the right foundation, and then you can add all the nice bells and whistles after you have that. So the companies that are winning right now are the ones focused on the strong fundamentals, right? Having a great digital presence, right? And we can get into exactly what this means, but having a strong website, your local search visibility is high, right? You've got good reviews. You're investing in either organic traffic growth like SEO, or you're spending money on ads, right? And it's not just one of these things. I think the message to really take home here, if you don't get anything else from today, is they all compound on each other. So it's not just you turn on one tactic and all of a sudden, you're the most successful rental company around. It truly is compounding growth and how each of these elements sort of fit within each other, from your website to traffic to even your sales process, right? All of that kind of goes into, are you going to get results from your marketing or not?
I think that's worth pausing on. I think the good news and bad news is there's not a silver bullet here. So once you invest into these programs, that will be your moat against competitors. But there's not, an easy button where you click a button and all of a sudden you're the, top rental company in your space, right? All these things sort of work together, along with buying 20,000 hats and handing those out, along with some of the outbound sales strategies we've talked about with LA Vigil. So, they all compound together.
Yeah.
It's important to invest in marketing.
And if someone's found the magic bullet, I would love to know. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's kind of go back to the basics. If let's just say there's a theoretical rental company, one location, they have a website, maybe doing a little bit of ads, but very minimal, haven't invested in SEO. What are the first things that you would coach a rental companies to focus on?
So the first thing I would look at, right, is actually not sort of just a marketing focused discipline. It's more of a business and financial planning discipline. You got to know your numbers when you get started. You need to know what you're willing to spend to acquire a customer, right? And there's a couple different ways people are willing to calculate that. Is it your total LTV, right? Your lifetime value, your expected lifetime value of a rental customer, right? And this could be, you expect them to transact 8 times over the next 4 years and you're going to get $3,200 from them. Or is it, that would be what I would consider like more of like the weekend warrior, that's sort of your bread and butter. Or you're going to contractors, right? You're doing bids for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 jobs, right? How much are you willing to spend to acquire those customers? Like that's a guardrail that you got to have in your business because that determines what you're willing to put money in and invest in to get the same result, because there's a lot of ways to solve for X here. So that's one thing, just get really clear on how much you're willing to spend to acquire a customer. And then 2, how much time or money do you want to put into it? So it's that old adage, you can have things good, fast, or cheap, but not all 3. You got to pick 2 and figure out what's most important to you. If you have more cash, less time, ads can be a great way to go, more of a paid distribution. If you got less cash, but you got more time, you're willing to put in some work, organic's a great way. So I would just think about sort of like those guardrails in your planning process. What's important to you, what works for somebody else may not work for you. So that's what you got to have clarity on going into this. That being said, like getting started with marketing, there's a couple of like fundamentals that I think everybody needs to get right. And one of the biggest things is just thinking about who your ideal customer is. And you can have multiple, like this is not such a like black and white dichotomy where you like, I've got one person, one problem. This is, who I'm going after. You can have multiple. My suggestion is start with one. Start with the easiest one that's easiest to reach. One that's easiest for you to serve. Maybe you have the type of equipment in your inventory that matches what that person would want, right? Start with that and you can expand out from there. And it's more than just knowing, like, we've all seen, or most of us have seen like the ideal customer profile where it's like its name and age and, what they do for a living and all that stuff, right? Like that's important, but I would focus on like, what are the problems that they're actually trying to solve by renting your equipment, right? You're not, at the end of the day, you're selling a solution to a problem. So that's what I would think about. Get really clear on like, do you want to go after, weekend warrior projects, right? Somebody doing landscaping in their backyard. Are you doing snow removal in the winter? Are you doing contractors, right? Working on big construction sites for commercial projects, right? Just think about who your ideal customer profile is and have a very clear idea of that getting started. That sort of determines everything else. I think it determines how you do your copy on your website, what types of offers and special incentives that you want to run. It determines the type of inventory and equipment that you buy to put in your fleet. It determines how much you're willing to spend for a customer, right? So all that stuff, like having that ideal customer profile is really the foundation to building a marketing strategy that actually drives results that's meaningful for you.
Yeah, it just really starts with what are we solving for, right? Because once that's defined, the solving part is actually not as hard. There's a lot of marketing tactics that groups can develop to convert on whatever you're trying to achieve. And this sort of reminds me of talking to Amin Kassar, I think episode 10 around, funding your rental business and potentially using debt or equity. And he's like, sort of like, what's going to make you sleep well at night? Start with that. What is going to make you sleep well at night? What are you comfortable with? And then flow from there. So for this, it's like really, as a rental business owner or operator, like what do you want? How much are you comfortable? How fast do you want to grow? How much capital do you want to invest in this? Because again, SEO versus paid marketing, there's different, pros and cons to each of those. Talking about like, what are you solving for? Number one, how fast do you want to grow? Number two, like, who is your ICP, ideal customer profile underneath that? Is it the weekend warrior? Is it the larger contractors, right? Because, and what types of equipment serve both of those are different. And you got to get that right and do all that work up front. That's the hard part. That's the thinking, and that ultimately comes directly from the owner of what they're solving for. But until you really define that, you can't really move forward, because otherwise, we talk a lot of groups who just turn on ads, and that's, interesting, but you got to do the homework up front. You got to understand what are you actually solving for.
Yeah, and just to add a note to that, like if you're lacking clarity around this, the best way to solve this is actually just go out and talk to the market, right? Like no expectations of having them transact with you or anything like that. Just go out and ask good questions about the problems, right? Figure out, what's keeping them up at night. Why do they need to rent your equipment, right? Like you got to get these intrinsic motivations down more from like a psychographic level. So you have that ammunition to be able to make this decision. Like the best way to get clarity on this is just talk to people.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the one thing that rental companies do really great. They're talking to their customers every day. And I remember Elliot also said, someone was like, hey, how do I get started with my rental business? He's like, I go buy 3 boxes of donuts and guarantee there's 3 job sites within 15 minutes of your house, and just go out and talk to people, right? And a lot
Brilliant.
is like, you have to know who your audience is, what their pain points are before you can do the marketing. The good news is like pretty much every rental company we talk to already knows that, right? So let's sort of move to the next level. We know what we're solving for. We know our ICP. I think, if there's a theory that the only thing that really matters is the long term. So if we sort of, you mentioned fast, good, and cheap, let's take fast out of the equation. If we wanted to do something that was good, but also good value, like how would you then start to think about building a marketing plan for a rental company?
Yeah, I think about like a marketing plan almost like a financial portfolio manager would about managing someone's retirement account, right? You have your long-term assets, fairly risk averse, right? This is your bond investment type of things, right? And then you have like your high growth tech stocks, right? That's kind of how I look at building a marketing plan, just from a financial management perspective. And you want to make sure that your like budget is allocated appropriately, right? So if you've got more capital, that's when I would say, let's be a little bit more risky here and put some money into ads, because I think you can drive overnight success with that. But if you want to take, sort of middle of the road, like not growing too fast, not growing too slow, just a really solid, decent strategy that's going to get you revenue growth year in and year out, there's a couple of things I would focus on. One, more long-term, is optimizing your local SEO presence and search visibility. I think this is probably number one priority for 99% of rental companies, unless you just work in a really weird, obscure market. Like having visibility from a local search perspective is going to compound over time. And it's something that shouldn't be skipped. It also doesn't cost a lot to do this, like to get that ramped up. So what I mean by local search visibility is when I'm on Google and I'm in your area, right, and I'm searching for equipment rental near me, that's what I want to show up for, right? And that there's that coveted 3-pack. I'm sure some of you have probably seen this before, where you're searching up a local business and Google will show you 3. That top one gets 99% of the traffic, and then it starts dropping off, right? So to get in that 3-pack, I would make that like a strategic priority. And there's a couple things that Google measures, and we can get into it on how to actually rank there. But local SEO from that perspective, as well as reviews, are super important. People will look you up. They will check to see what your track record is. They will see what other people are having to say about your business. So having your online presence polished and cleaned up is really important as well. Also, Google uses that in their algorithm to determine rankings and how relevant and trustworthy somebody is. So making sure you're prioritizing those reviews and just having an active presence. I say one of the biggest mistakes a lot of rental companies will make with just not being present is very inconsistent posting on like social channels, for example, which are relevant and scored in algorithms. It does not, I would take consistency over quantity. So if you can handle once a month, do once a month, right? You don't have to commit to, 8 posts a week, right? That's a lot. But having consistency and high quality content, that's where we're seeing the market going from a social perspective. And then the last thing I'll say on this is content on the website. So your rental storefront needs to have content specifically tailored to your local area. There's a whole roadmap for this, but essentially what I would focus on here is just providing value. 600 to 800 word post on your site can do a lot. It doesn't take that long to write. And in fact, like one of the things we encourage a lot of our clients to do at Quipli is, you can record. I'm sure you've got enough local knowledge about what works well for certain types of projects in your area, whatever the case is, right? Or for your market. You can even record that, transcribe it, use an online tool and throw that up on your website, as a blog post. Any sort of like hyper relevant local content that has a lot of value will help your local SEO capabilities.
Yeah. Well, you just do a lot out there. I don't know how I go through this. And by the way, when you said active presence, consistency over quantity, I've got an uncle on Facebook who does both. He posts every month, but also 8 times a day. So you could do both. But
and you remembered him.
He remembered it. I mean, yeah. There's an element that like there's no such thing as bad press or bad marketing. Like even if you're in the conversation and it's not a great, maybe not getting the best things being said, that's actually sometimes a good thing because you're in the conversation. But separate topic. You mentioned 4 things. We haven't even gotten into this. Is really before you even spending money on Google, or which can be expensive, right? You mentioned things. Top priorities: so local SEO, getting reviews built out, having an active presence, and then content on the website. We can talk about the website here in a second. So maybe kind of just going through each of those briefly. On local SEO, you mentioned the 3-pack. So when you search for equipment rental near me, United and Sunbelt are always up there. There's always like one of the leading independents in that space. And I think what we found is like it's actually not that hard to get into the top 3 because this niche in particular, United and Sunbelt do a good job, but the average independent, it's not as competitive if you build out your website and your content right to rank very high on SEO. And why that matters, like, we've seen, we obviously do e-commerce for rental companies. Like the companies that already have a strong SEO, when we turn that on, it's immediately you're getting orders that day, right? And the companies that don't have an SEO presence, it takes time to build up. We see a direct tie between the SEO and revenue, 100%. But let's talk about local SEO. Like, what are the basics that a rental company should start thinking about? That's the first thing you mentioned as a priority. You mentioned why it's important. How do we actually go to improve it?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would do is just make sure I'm actually surprised at how many folks don't look at this, but your Google business profile, formerly Google My Business, that is something that should not be underestimated. Google's still the largest search engine in the world, right? I mean, it's falling a little bit, but right now from a local search perspective, Google's where it's at. You've got to look at that. Google has built-in analytics for you to be able to go in and see how many impressions and clicks and calls your profile has generated in the last 30 days, right? You can go in and start measuring that. To improve the results there's a couple things that we've seen that make like average and mediocre Google business profiles a lot different from like the ones that do really well. The ones that do really well have they're getting reviews consistently. And a great way to do this is like in your rental software, you need to have this set up where after somebody's had an order completed, right, they're getting an automated email asking for a review, and ideally a positive one, right? There's ways to actually separate that out. If someone had a bad experience, you can send them to a different destination, and we'll get into that too much. But you want to have a programmatic way to generate Google reviews. These are really important. The other thing is just some of the basics with like your store hours and your phone number and your email address, having those accurate. I can tell you there's nothing more frustrating than showing up to try and rent something when you close an hour before what your Google business said. And I'm sure we've experienced this with like restaurants. This is a big problem. So making sure all that is accurate, because that does sort of weigh into this. The other thing is products. So a lot of folks don't know you can add your product, like your fleet catalog, into your Google business profile. And we do this for our clients, but essentially what you could do is go through your entire inventory, all the categories of products that you have, and add them to your Google business profile. Because what ends up happening is someone's searching for a particular type of piece of equipment, right? And if your product is listed in that business profile and it's near them, you're going to have a higher likelihood of showing up. So adding images, links to them, all that kind of stuff definitely helps with showing up more often and increasing visibility. I think the last thing on Google Business Profile to think about is photos. There are a lot of folks that will just skip this or just add their logo to the business profile. And what's really helpful is adding photos of your storefront, if you have one, or of your equipment. But in addition to that, photos of you on the job site, photos of your team, your staff working on the counter. Like all this stuff matters when consumers are looking at potential rental companies to work with on their Google Business Profile. So G&B is huge for local SEO.
Yeah, and then to get that process started, it's like, you could get your initial account created in what, 10 minutes? They got a postcard, you got but then building out the content, it's an hour. It's like really not a ton of effort. And what I think Harvard Business School did a study on the difference between having an average review of 3.5 on your Google Business Profile and 4.5, they saw an increase of revenue of 9%. So if you're doing $1 million a year of rental revenue, that's extra $100,000 of revenue you could gain just by improving your reviews. And then, you can talk to customers directly and ask for reviews, but in our rental software, and like we have very others, at the end of every rental, thumbs up, thumbs down. If it's a thumbs up, it deep links them straight to leave a 5-star review. So you can generate dozens of reviews just sort of automatically, right? And that's a real attachment on revenue. And on the just SEO side, the American Rental Association put this out in 2020, I believe. They said that 80% of rental transactions involve going to a rental website. 80%. Like, it's almost every 4 out of 5 rental transactions involve going to your site. And if they can't find your site to begin with, you're already behind the 8 ball, right? If you can't, and then to get to your site and it's not clear what you rent, your inventory is not up to date, you don't have prices, right? Those all sort of hurt you. And I think everybody knows this, but that's real data. 80% of rental transactions are going to your website. Even if they're not transacting online, they're at least going to your website. And then that's why you need to be in the Google in 3-pack at the top and making sure all these things sort of flow together.
Yeah. And just to add to that, Kyle, like the mobile aspect of this, 60 to 70%, I can't remember the exact number, of web searches on Google are from mobile. And if you go on your phone right now and, do a search for a local business, right, you're going to see on Google, you're going to see the 3-pack show up first, right? That's who's getting most of the real estate. So if you're not already in that 3-pack, I would make that a strategic priority in your business over the next, 1 to 2 years. And it can take some time to get there, especially if you have, you've got big national competitors that know all this stuff. But the mobile aspect too is huge here.
Yeah, and go back towards the active presence. And the other thing we've talked about is when people leave reviews, following up on those. Say, hey, thanks for the 5-star review, or someone left a 1-star review. Hey, we're sorry, this happened. What can we do to make it right? Every time someone leaves a review, being able to respond to that, right? That helps your rankings. It helps your visibility. And then you also mentioned the content posting. You said it doesn't need to be 8 times a week, but at least once a month. Tell me what some of the things people should be doing on a once a month basis to make sure they're posting content and blog posts to make sure they're staying active online.
Yeah, for sure. So the way we think about content creation is actually not content creation at all. It's just documenting what you're already doing. There are, as a rental owner, there are probably a million things you do every day. All of that is great content, right? I mean, this is something, it's as simple as taking a quick picture of, a checkout process, right? Or inspecting your equipment, right? Or your team meeting that you have on Monday mornings, right? It's these things that you're already doing on a daily basis. It's just about documenting that. And if you can sort of have this mindset shift of, I got to create this content instead of I just need to document what I'm already doing and share it with the world, it actually becomes a lot easier to stay consistent with this. So, some of the types of posts that we see do really well, obviously like any sales or promotions that you're running are great. But in addition to that, showing a delivery that's happening on a construction site, or showing the before and after of a customer's project because they redid their landscaping in their yard. These types of posts that you may already, like, I know a perfect example of somebody who had a rental transaction and their customer sent them a before and after picture, texted it to them. Like, that is an incredible way to just take that, put it on there. It didn't take you 5 seconds to do that. So that's like the types of posts that we see that do really well. And when someone's in the consideration phase of looking for a rental company to work with, they're seeing that. It's very helpful in terms of just driving up engagement and building that trust for someone to either come into your store or transact with you online.
That's a good point. I think what we've also found, Evan, what we've talked about is that the more natural, organic sort of posts actually do much better. And I think it's also the audience in general in 2024 is sort of tired of the polished, perfect ad. If it's too perfect and staged, it's staged and it loses credibility. And the posts and the content that does the best is someone walking around with their cell phone, or they're taking pictures and it's a little grainy and maybe there's some typos in some of the responses, right? Like, because it's not perfect, it feels more credible and therefore more authentic. And I think when people are shopping for rental companies, they want to see a company with reviews, et cetera, but the more authentic they are, the more credible you seem. And I think so it's important for the owner to be posting these things, but also getting your customers to, when they leave your review, post a before and after picture of the project they did, and make sure they're helping you build your content out yourself. It doesn't need to be a one-man show. It's really a community. It's a big tent here, right? And if you have happy customers, they would be happy to do that.
Yeah, we see that like time and time again. It used to be, the objection to, putting out content, right? It's like, it's got to be picture perfect, right? And polished. But what people want is realness and authenticity. It does not need to be perfect. In fact, to your point, Kyle, it needs to be like very authentic to a fault, right? Like, we've seen the best content. It's just somebody snapped a picture with their iPhone, right? It's nothing that's like polished, because that actually could go against you from a trust perspective.
Yeah, and then we haven't really talked about this, but this is sort of a newer thing happening in the market. I think it's the importance of video, and we've seen particularly TikTok and YouTube, and then Elliot does it on LinkedIn, but like just the authentic videos. Impact Rental, Weston Johnson does that, and he has a huge following. There's other people who have just said, let me just document how I go about my day, and I'm checking a customer out, I'm fixing a piece of equipment. That content is scored incredibly high, and that's free. There's no paid advertising, and all that takes is your time and posting it on TikTok and YouTube. And we weren't planning on talking about that today, but I just think there's, once you sort of get the basics down and get your business profile set up, SEO set up. There's other creative ways. It's really just around documenting all the things you're already doing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the TikTok thing, right, we'll see what happens with that platform as time goes on. But the principle remains the same, right? Having video content is something that I think is a underused asset in a lot of local companies. And we can get into that, but you're totally right, Kyle. Like having just the real authentic stuff, documenting what you're going through on a day-to-day basis is really how you build a strong brand and presence in 2024.
Greg chatted and makes a good point. The importance of tracking your marketing, seeing what works or what doesn't. We haven't really talked about the data side. I think marketing is a little bit of qualitative and quantitative. What are some of the metrics that people can be looking at to see if their marketing programs are working?
Yeah. So before we get into the exact metrics, one thing I think is really important is just correctly identifying your attribution sources. And what I mean by that is figuring out what campaigns and programs are actually driving revenue, not just clicks and impressions, right? But what's bringing in dollars in the door. If your org is not that big, you probably have an idea of what that is already. But if you've got several locations, right, and you're, managing, $500,000 to $1 million a year, like marketing budget, things get a little complicated. One thing that I like to see in this situation, and it can be hard to do this, especially if you're super busy in the summer, it's just asking folks like how they heard about you on the phone or when they come to pick up an order, right? Like training your guys at the counter to do that, I think is really important, because that feedback and be able to look at that and say, look, 80% of our revenue in the last 12 months came from like people searching us up on Google. We need to put more dollars in there. So just like asking people how they heard about you. That being said, like some of the metrics that we like to track, just to see how things are trending, right? Organic traffic, how that's trending. And this would be like sessions. So you could use a tool like Google Analytics, which is what we use to track how your traffic is trending over time. You also should look at how many online orders you're getting every month, right? And track that, see the trend line there. So, obviously here at Quipli, we have a complete e-commerce solution, right? Where you can do a full reservation. That's something we like to track, see how those numbers are trending over time. If you don't have Quipli and you're just doing some sort of like form submission, that's great too. Track that. And also look at how much you're spending, right? And look at your cost per lead or cost per reservation. These are some of the core metrics. I think engagement, metrics on the social channels, how many likes and comments, things like that you're getting. Those are relevant. I would say less relevant in terms of like measuring revenue, but like where you should spend more time and more investment and maybe more money. Like I would look at that. So, if you're doing paid, click-through rates, how many clicks you're getting, what's your cost per click, all that kind of stuff on the paid side. And then on an organic perspective, are you getting these amount of impressions, comments, things like that? Are people sharing and tagging people? Like these are all the sort of leading indicators to look at to see how well your content's performing. And the last thing I'll say is like the conversion rate on your site, right? So on average, out of 100 people that come to your website, how many of them are calling or putting in a reservation to have an order, right? Like this is something that should be tracked, and you can optimize over time as well with different types of lead, different types of content. We can get into that. But yeah, these are the metrics that we look at.
Yeah, I think it's important. The thing you mentioned is to ask your customers how they heard of you, because with attribution, it's not a perfect science. And it may say, oh, this was a Google lead. Well, the reality was it was a referral, and they heard about you at a local event, and they then specifically searched for your name, but it'll come through as a Google ad lead, but in reality it was a referral, right? So I think that's why the data is important, but you got to be able to talk to people because you got to fill in some of those gaps and find out exactly what's working. And I think, what you mentioned was overall website traffic. That's like a basic one to look at because as you invest in SEO, which sometimes takes 3 to 6 plus months to see the results of, and you invest in Google ads, things like that, like you can see your traffic grow. And then especially with the seasonality effects that everybody experiences, right? Maybe slower in the winter, busier in the spring and summer. You can then compare those year over year to sort of see how you're performing. And, I think that's if there's one metric to look at on the marketing side, it's just general website traffic. That's like a pretty basic one that encompasses all these things together, right? And I think you can drill down deeper underneath that, but looking at just general website traffic and then asking customers how they heard of you, like those can start to fill in some of the gaps of what's working and not working.
Yeah, definitely. And if you have the team and the sort of tech to do it, tracking your revenue by source is pretty critical. I think once you get to a certain level, you need to know if, from year 1 to year 2, if you look at those in comparison, right, how much revenue growth you're getting from each one of those channels, right? And be able to say, look, we've dipped here or we've increased here and be able to make budget decisions accordingly. So you get to ultimately like a more profitable business. Like marketing it is less of an arts and crafts center, but it can be a revenue driver for the business if done correctly. So being able to take sort of that data scientist hat, right, and look at that data, but also the artist hat, right, of thinking of new creative ways to drive traffic. Like having that data readily accessible is pretty difficult, I'd say, in the current climate with how tech is. But like if you got a good rental software that has like some of this attribution built in, that's definitely something that you should be looking at and tracking as well.
Evan, you love when I say marketing is arts and crafts department. That's your favorite thing.
I love saying it. Yeah.
I want to talk about the website and building high performing rental websites, conversion best practices, right? Because it's as we talked about, you could drive all the traffic in the world, but if it gets to your website and it's confusing, it doesn't make sense, you don't have inventory listed, et cetera, you're sort of dead in the water then. What are some of the important things around thinking about your rental website that are, must-haves?
So must-haves on the rental site, there's a couple of things that come to mind that for me are non-negotiables. One is having your products and your inventory listed on there. Not only does it save you like time on the phone with folks, but it's also more of a chance to get more rankings from an SEO perspective, as well as position your brand. You may have 200 or 300 pieces of equipment, right? But if you don't have any on your website, like people have no idea how you can help them, right? And what we're seeing is like consumers want to move through buying process more independently than ever right now. And so I would have my entire fleet categorized with pricing on my site. Like that to me, it's a non-negotiable, especially as, we talked about how sort of the Amazon effect of all these other industries. It's what consumers expect right now. So that's one. Another thing is just having your a page with some basic contact information. It's actually surprising to me how many companies I see that don't have their phone number on just miss the phone number on the website or an address or something like that, right? Like you need to make it easy for people to find contact information. This also goes to play into your SEO because Google will scrape that data. And so that's also really important. And then sort of the last thing is just having the homepage, I think is really important to think about the structure and design of it, why someone's on your homepage in the first place. And this can be a little tricky too, especially if you do like sales and rental, or if you have another service that you offer, like designing a homepage that is clear, easy to understand, loads quickly is really important. This is becoming more and more important as we go through the years. I've seen Google over-index on this, right? Particularly loading quickly on mobile. I think is something to take into account. There's actually a really easy way you can find out what your load speeds are. If you just go to Google page speed test and throw your website in there, it'll tell you, it'll give your website a grade. So just take a look at that. That is something to really consider. And then I think the checkout piece as well, having a full flow where someone can go in, pull up your inventory, decide what they want to rent, and then go in and complete a full order. That is, I think, becoming table stakes in what you need to have in your website and your tech stack right now. Other things to add to that, having upsells, one-click upsells, which I know we do here at Quipli, but whether you're using us or not, having a mechanism where you can sell or rent attachments or other products that are sold or rented frequently together in one or two clicks, like that's going to increase your average order value, right just off the bat. So having that, if you have insurance or anything like that, just having that built into your site, I think these are the core elements that I would look for.
Yeah, you mentioned a few interesting things there. On the phone number, I was actually thinking about, we launched our first rental websites a few years ago, and we didn't have phone number on there. And someone was like, hey, can you put phone number at the very top header? So we did that, and we started tracking how many people, how often that was clicked, and it was insane. Like how often people look at your website, see what you have, and then they call you. We obviously still believe in e-commerce, and we see 20-25% of all orders are e-commerce, and that's growing. But the reality is most of your customers are going to call you, and having that very easily at the top of your website. We also see about 50% of all website traffic for our customers are on mobile. So half of your customers are on their phone, and they go to your website, they see your equipment, looks good, boom, one button, and it directly calls you, like making that really easy. We saw an increase in rental revenue for people just by adding the phone number at the very top of the header, making it really easy. And I think it's like, we're talking general best practices here. And the reality is, like, all these little details end up mattering. You mentioned pricing. That was something that 4 years ago, people were very uncomfortable putting rental pricing on their website. And I don't really hear ever pushback about this anymore. That's one thing that's been really cool to see, is how much the industry has accepted putting transparent pricing on the website. And, that was a battle 4 years ago, but like now that is table stakes. Everybody's doing it for the most part. And it, just makes the process better for renters. And you sort of talked about the independent rental journey people go through. They don't want to be sold to. They want to feel like they're making their own independent decision. So how they do that is they check out your website, they check out your reviews, they maybe talk to some of your customers, and then they decide to interact with you. But they sometimes have done 3, 4, 5 different touch points with your Facebook page and your website and your reviews before they actually make a decision to rent with you. That's why it's important to have all these things built out and interacting together.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, like they may call you, right, to place the order, but they've already gone to your site, right, and looked at your inventory and found the piece of equipment that they want and looked at the price, right?
Yeah.
Like that, having that, giving consumers all the information they need to make a decision independently is the way that people want to buy in 2024.
And we're eating our own dog food here. Like, we've learned that. We put our pricing on our website 2 months ago, and we have demo videos on the internet now. And like, now I get into a demo and people are like, yep, I've seen it. I've already talked to 3 of your customers. I've already read your reviews. I've already seen pricing. And it's like, great.
Yep.
Actually, because at that point, the fit of is this going to work out or not is actually much higher, because we've already gone through a lot of that steps. And so we've seen it for our brand as well, but I think it's important why you need to put content out and just be transparent. That is where the market's moving. It's around transparency. And, I don't know, go back 10 or 20 years, the rental industry didn't have pricing on websites, and it was everyone had their own price and pre-negotiated rates. And that's changed. It's changed, in every industry, and particularly in the rental industry as well. People are making independent decisions themselves, and they're checking out multiple touch points with your brand before they make a decision.
Yeah. And I would say, just from a business value perspective, right, the more you can sort of build this ecosystem, right, around your business, almost like digital real estate, the more enterprise value you're building. So when you think about exiting, right, or there's some sort of liquidity event, you're raising money, whatever the case is, like this is going to set you up to be very, very different conversation from like if you were totally like just referrals and you didn't rely on any sort of marketing to drive new business. Like if you've got a predictable revenue machine installed, it's a very different conversation. And that's what we're seeing, across the board with all of our larger customers.
Yeah. Totally agreed. I want to talk about our last topic here, which is the paid side, which I always like to talk about because this is like the gasoline on the fire, where you only should really do this once you've done all the other things we've talked about. You've decided who your ICP is. You've figured out what your budget is, what you're solving for. You built out your website. You built out your Google business profile. You built out your SEO. You've got your pricing and inventory. Everything's ready to go, right? This is the final step here. And this relates to a question Ahmed had. He just asked is, what is the marketing budget per year for a company with 2 locations and 100 machines maybe at each location, right? So, Evan, I'll let you answer that last as you sort of think about the strategy here. And the thing that I think about is, you mentioned acquisition earlier. One of our earlier customers was acquired by a national player, and we were running their paid ads for them. They were getting, I think, 60 to 70 leads per month from some of the paid ads. And when he was under letter of intent, we turned off the ads and his revenue plummeted. He called me after a week. He's like, we've got to turn these back on because I got to get to this acquisition.
Yeah.
Paid marketing's working. So this is the most exciting topic for me because I think this is where there's a lot of variability. And this is if you have a budget, you can ramp this up. But talk to me about paid advertising and how people should think about that.
Yeah, paid is an interesting animal. I think that it has the ability to reveal a good business from a bad business very quickly. Paid is an accelerant. It is not a magic bullet, and it does not work for everybody. The things you have to get right, like you've already mentioned, Kyle, is the fundamentals, right? You've got everything we've already talked about kind of checked off the box, right? And you need to continue to ramp up what's already working. That's when I would consider adding paid media into the mix. From a channel perspective, like one of the paid media angles we like right now is Google ads, and particularly local search ads are really impactful, especially if you have a very large sort of base of equipment. Your fleet size is kind of large. You've got a lot of different types of categories of equipment in your fleet, right? Not all of them are going to rank organically. That's just how it is, right? But there's still search demand out there for it. And so I like using Google ads for that. You can run paid search ads fairly inexpensively as a test to see if it's going to work for you. What I like to tell our clients is, take $500 or $1,000 and be okay with burning it, right? Just say, look, we're going to chalk this. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and we move on, right? But let's take a little bit of cash, put in a couple of campaigns, and I'll get into the structure of those in a minute, but let's just see if this is a good channel for us. And sometimes it's not. And the reasons why it wouldn't be is if you're doing, like, for example, if you're doing a lot of re-rentals, because your margins aren't great, it can be hard to actually make that profitable. Also, if you're advertising equipment that is really low dollar amount, I could think of like if you're doing like weed eater rental or something like that, I probably would not use Google ads for that. I would think high dollar, high ticket sort of, this is your skid steer, compactor, larger pieces of equipment that rent out for a higher daily or weekly rate, and look at your, equipment that already has good dollar utilization, right? Stuff that's flying off the shelves. Put those on your Google ads. Like, there's a reason why they already have a lot of demand organically. So if you add paid onto that, maybe that leads you to make the decision You need to invest in, 3 more compactors, this quarter, right? Like just taking a look at the data that you're already seeing organically and adding paid onto it is how to win in that. There's a couple of different types of ways to think about budgeting for Google Ads, particularly. One is, you want to think of, like, going back to what I said in the beginning, think about how much you're willing to spend cost of acquisition wise for a new customer. And particularly, you could even drill this down on, on a particular rental. What I like to do in the beginning is just set up sort of like a general campaign. This is not focused on any sort of like type of equipment. It's more of like rent equipment near me or equipment rental near me, those types of search terms, and just see what people are buying, what they are renting through that campaign particularly, because that's going to give you an idea of like, okay, let's actually run a campaign with a specific type of fleet category. And typically those will have a little bit lower cost per clicks. So you can drive more traffic for those specific types of equipment at a lower cost than you would just like sort of a general umbrella campaign. As a rule of thumb here though, like for setting your budget on Google Ads, I would think about how many rentals you'd like to see on an average, like from Google Ads at a $1,000 to $2,000 a month is probably like the floor where I would start on an ad budget. We typically see it highly depends on the area, right? Because like, renting something in Chicago or LA is a lot different than renting something in, Albany, Georgia, or, somewhere like less populated. So like that competition locally is going to have a tremendous impact on how much you need to spend on the Google Ads. But typically what we see is somewhere in the range of, $75 on up to $300 cost of acquisition for a new rental order. So that's per order, right? If I'm, in rural Georgia, my cost is probably going to be a little bit closer to $75 an order or less, right? Versus, in Chicago, New York, LA, a big city, Atlanta, you're going to pay a little bit more. And your rental rate should reflect that. But that's how I would think about reverse engineering, a budget and say, look, I want to generate X amount of new orders this quarter from, paid ads. And, based on these projections, this average cost per order, here's roughly how much I need to spend. Mm-hmm. And I wish I could give you a blanket answer on like how much it costs to get an order, but it's so variable based on location, type of equipment, and how great your ads are.
And I think, Rodney Coker, a month ago, he shared that they were spending about $2,500 per month and on marketing, and that was in one location. I think the good news, Evan, you've run marketing programs across many different industries. This industry is not as expensive or competitive on the paid side as other industries. So I think if you have the budget, you can stomach it. You can do pretty well with a modest budget. I don't think you need to be spending $20,000 a month, but $2,500 a month, depending on your market, you could actually do pretty well and rank pretty high.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the area, like if you're spending $2,500 a month on Google Ads alone, like I'd expect you to get at least like anywhere between 5 and 15 orders, something like that. It really is highly dependent. But you're right, Kyle. This locally, like generating leads for equipment rental customers is actually a bit cheaper than some of the other industries that we've seen. I mean, definitely compared to like real estate, right, or insurance, other verticals, right? Like it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah. So Evan, I sort of want to wrap up here. What are the biggest mistakes that rental companies make when they're thinking about digital marketing, and what should people do to avoid some of those things?
Yeah, I think a big mistake is not doing it or ignoring it, pretending like it doesn't exist. You've got it, it's a necessary evil. There's plenty of people out there that can help you, Quipli included. So don't ignore it, number one. Number two, don't make it too complicated. It is really about just making sure that you're visible online. We're not building, a huge complicated web here. It's about showing up when you need to show up and making people, giving people a reason to trust you, right? This is a little bit of content, some ads, and making sure your digital presence is accurate and complete. And then I think the sort of last thing here is just like taking too long to like change and move when something's not working. You'll be able to tell pretty quickly if something you try doesn't work, especially like on the ad front, right? If your cost per click is more than what you're even willing to spend to rent that particular item, cut it, right? And let the winners ride. I think this takes a tremendous amount of discipline, like just cut your losses and let the winners go, and continue to compound, even though it may feel uncomfortable, right? Spending, if you're not used to spending any money on advertising, right? And you're starting to spend, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 a month, may feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I would lean into that as long as it's being profitable.
I like that. Biggest mistake is not doing anything. And some, it sounds like just get started. It doesn't have to be the most sophisticated marketing operation in the world. Just get started. And obviously, like you mentioned, we can help groups, but there's also a lot of groups at the ARA show who just do marketing for equipment rental companies. And I think that's another good resource. I think the biggest thing is finding people who know this space, because equipment rental there's nuance here, and you wonder someone who's worked in this particular space. And there's several groups out there who do that. So, Evan, appreciate you coming on, talk about marketing 101 here for equipment rental company. As I sort of started off, we have a 4-hour class we did in conjunction with the American Rental Association a few months ago. That's on their website if you're an ARA member. We've also put it in the Rental Roundtable Facebook group if you want to access that. So there's 4 1-hour sessions on different topics if you want a deeper dive here. It's great to talk to you about this, Evan. It's important. It's not a silver bullet. I think there's an outbound sales component as well, but there are basic marketing best practices that sort of put you in the top 20% just by doing some of the basics here, which I think we sort of covered. And a lot of great stuff here. Last thing I'll say is Elliot Vigil is coming back on. We're doing a special session with him August 14th through 16th, 3 days in a row, 4 p.m. Eastern time for an hour and a half, 3 days in a row. It's a special session we're doing with him based on a lot of the feedback we got from having him on. We're going to send some more information out here on that in the next few weeks. So just kind of save the date, August 14th, 16th, 4 p.m. Eastern with Elliot. Should be so some good topic. Jeff, Elliot is awesome. Jeff and Elliot had lunch last week. He'd send me a picture of you guys having lunch. So anyways, should be a good session. And Evan, appreciate you coming on and talking marketing. It's our favorite thing to talk about here. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kyle. Anybody who wants to join me for a one-on-one session, you're more than welcome to. Happy to give you some recommendations on your marketing strategy. We'll also send out after this group of documents and playbooks and things like that you can take and run with your business.
Yeah, I'm actually going to sign up, Evan, your time for free. So I'll give you my email, not yours, because you don't want that out there, but Kyle@Quipli.com. Email me if you want, one-on-one session complimentary with Evan if you want to just talk more about marketing basics, some things you can do. Email me, we can get that set up for you guys. So anyways, thanks for coming on. Thanks, Evan.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, guys. Bye.
All right. See you, everyone.